Okay, time to take a look at what's grabbing headlines around the world. Florence Villeminot joins me. Flo, hello again. Let's start stateside. Donald Trump in hot water again. Notes made by the former FBI director James Comey suggesting that there was some pressure on him to abandon, let's say, an investigation into Michael Flynn.
That's right. Now, the New York Times is the paper that initially reported on this story, so let's take a look at their editorial. Now, keep in mind, they didn't actually read this memo, but one of James Comey's associates read part of it, and this, you can see the opening line here for their editorial. This is really the quote that you're hearing all over the press. "I hope you can let this go." So that's allegedly what Donald Trump asked James Comey to do about this investigation into the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Now, the New York Times is very much alarmed by these words. Anyone who is concerned about protecting the Constitution should be alarmed by these words. The key question, of course, is, did Donald Trump obstruct justice? Well, according to this editorial, it's hard not to see the outlines of an attempt by Trump to quash this federal investigation.
Right, well, according to the New York Times, that Comey's memo is just part of a paper trail that he created to document Trump's efforts to abandon this investigation.
So there's the paper trail coming from Comey. Now, the White House says this is not how the conversation happened at all. So you've got a paper trail versus what the White House is saying. What do you make of that? Well, you can see here the Washington Post and their editorial saying what's needed, what the country needs, is actually to hear from James Comey himself, to see his memos, and to hear White House tapes, if they exist, of this conversation. The Washington Post says it's very important for all this information to be made available to the people in the United States, and it calls on an independent investigation into the White House's behavior.
Right, well, speaking of the White House, papers are continuing to focus. They're not letting up on reports that Trump allegedly shared classified information with Russian officials.
That's the other big story, of course, that we've been covering for you this week. It's the latest in a string of incidents that has sparked a lot of criticism regarding Trump, that he acted improperly or incompetently. You can see here this article in Courrier International talking about how the calls for impeachment are getting stronger. And you can see this cartoon here. This is by Bertrams from the Netherlands, with Uncle Sam looking quite worse for the wear there with that huge thumb. You might notice on the top of the thumb is Donald Trump's signature hair.
All right, the British paper, The Guardian, is exploring how impeachment all works.
Well, we've been talking, about the possibility of impeachment, but how does it actually work? There's a really interesting article in The Guardian if you need a crash course in impeachment in the U.S. To break it down for you, according to the Constitution, a president can be impeached for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Of course, all that is open to interpretation. Now, 2/3 of the Senate is required to convict a president of impeachable offenses. And the Guardian points out that what's key, really, is public opinion. If the people turn on the president, well, then Congress might follow. And the Guardian has an interesting poll. This is back from February. 46% of Americans at the time believed that Donald Trump should be impeached. Of course, that was long before this recent string of scandal.
All right, a word now, Flo, on Iran, the country gearing up for presidential elections on Friday.
Indeed. It's starting to get on the front pages of some papers. It's on the front page of The Independent. You can see they're talking about how Iranian voters fear the Trump effect that has perhaps boosted the hardline candidate Ebrahim Raisi, who's seen to essentially be the front-runner against the more reformist-backed incumbent Hassan Rouhani. Now, what's interesting is these two candidates are seen as being very different, but if we take a look at a cartoon in Al Arab, that's a pan-Arab paper based in London, you can see that no matter how the Iranians toss the dice on Friday, you're going to get the same result. Well, according to this cartoon, it won't change much for the country.
All right, well, let's stay in the region. Yesterday, Syrian authorities are literally laughing at US allegations that it was carrying out mass killings at a famous prison.
This was because on Monday, the US State Department said that Syria, well, the government, is hanging up to 50 detainees a day at the I'm pronouncing this wrong, Saidania prison near Damascus, and burning some of the remains to hide the proof. You can see this is a photo, a satellite photo that was released allegedly showing a crematorium. Now, Damascus, and you can read more about it here in the Wall Street Journal, dismissed what it called a Hollywood-like story that is detached from reality and false. Now, this story has been getting a lot of attention in the region and in Arab language papers. If we go back to Al Arab, there's another cartoon depicting the situation in Syria. You can see here the Syrian regime grinding the Syrian people to a pulp there.
All right, finally today, May 17th marks the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia.
Now, gay rights have made some advances in some countries, but it's still a grim picture in many parts of the world. You can read more about it here in L'Humanité that talks about a report that was published today. 72 countries consider homosexuality to be a crime today, punishable by prison or death. You can see a map here. Now, yesterday, 3 French LGBT groups filed a complaint against the Chechen government at the International Criminal Court. They accused the government of instigating a wave of persecution against gay people, essentially turning a blind eye. And you can see here this cartoon in Courrier International, essentially the Chechen police in denial. What homophobia? But you can see that target there with the rainbow flag.
OK, Flo, thank you very much for the press review today. May 17th marks the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia.